Well, hi there, I'm Adrian Warnock, and I'm filming this on the 5th of January in the morning. And really, what I want to say first of all is thank you so much for all of you who've been taking advantage of the offer to get both my books at the moment. That's Race with Christ and that's Amazing Grace, free. And this is free on Kindle. Or, of course, if you don't have a Kindle, you can read that on your phone or on the computer. And for the case of Race with Christ, that is available in paperback or in hardback form. Amazing Grace, not yet, and I'll come on to why in a moment. But yeah, thanks so much, because lots of you have taken opportunity to do that. I will just say this, the Race with Christ offer expires today, so that's the 5th of January. And if you're seeing this after the 5th of January, you can still get Race with Christ on Kindle. If you've got Unlimited, it will still be free. If you don't have Kindle Unlimited, which allows you to have like a library of many different Kindle books for free, well, actually you pay a subscription for that. But if you don't have that, the price is still going to be pretty low, and I'm going to try and keep it as low as possible. Same thing for Amazing Grace, although with Amazing Grace, just because of the way the dates worked, the offer expires tomorrow, so the 6th. So if you're watching this on the 6th, you're not too late to get hold of Amazing Grace, How Faith Grows in the Human Heart. I'll talk a little bit more about both those books in just a moment. But I would like to just point out to anyone who's observant and looking behind here, we do have a light dusting of snow here in the UK, which we're all very excited about because it doesn't happen very often, but also slightly apprehensive about because in the UK, even just a few millimetres of snow can be enough to cause complete travel chaos. And I've got to actually drive somewhere quite local this morning. I've got an appointment, but so I'm a little bit apprehensive about what the roads are going to be like. But there we are. Such is life. So just going back for a moment, I'd just like to take you right back, actually, to why did I start writing in the first place? Well, believe it or not, I've now been writing online since 2003, so that's more than 20 years ago. And I still remember quite well, I was actually a little bored one day, and I was involved in work situation at the time, which, it was a good job, but it wasn't quite as challenging. I was about to move into the pharmaceutical industry, but one day I was just thinking I'd like to be able to write something that might just, be something my children might be interested in the future, or other people might be interested in, or indeed I just might be interested in. Initially, I just gathered a few quotes and wrote a few ideas down, and I didn't think of myself as a writer back then. I was a blogger, and it was very short form content. And I'll never forget later on, fast forward a few years, and when I was offered a book contract, suddenly discovering that writing a long form book is quite a bit different to writing lots of short articles. But it's good practice to have done the short articles. And if you're thinking about writing a book, I would recommend the idea of the discipline of blogging, or people just talk about it as writing articles today. And that helps you to build that ability to do it. And also perhaps to read more. And on the subject of reading more, for all of you who very kindly got hold of my book for free, all I ask is this, and it's a request, it's not a demand, but would you consider at least writing an honest review of my book? Because if all of you wrote reviews of that book, it would be incredibly successful within Amazon, because Amazon very much favors books that other people review. And I think it's very important for us in this day of AI algorithms, whether that's on Amazon or on Facebook or on X or on other forms of social media, or even just in Googling, we actually have a part to play in shaping the algorithms. It's very easy for us sometimes to complain about the algorithms and be like, well, why are you sending me stuff I'm not interested in? And part of the reason for that is the algorithm thinks you are interested. And you say, well, why is that? Well, it's looking for things you click on, it's looking for things you watch, it's looking for what you scroll past and pay attention to, and it's also looking for things you like, or you share, or you write reviews about. And if you do none of those things, then the algorithm will just, I guess, be looking at other people's opinions and will give you the stuff that it thinks will happen. Now, one of the challenges somebody like me has is that what the algorithm is often looking for is things that will stir up response, stir up comments, stir up a bit of anger if necessary. But it doesn't really care if the content is more neutral. It's just that people don't tend to comment on things that are more neutral. So if you're trying to write a sort of middle of the road piece, if you're trying to write a piece that is both speaking in truth but also in love, if you're wanting to write a piece that is trying to produce peace, is trying to aim at understanding rather than passion, aim at growth rather than outrage, then the risk is that people look at it, oh, that's nice, and then move on. We all have a tendency to comment on things that we don't agree on. And what I want to urge you to think about, and not just for my books, and not even just for my online content, I'm asking you to think about this for everything you read and everything that you're interested in. Would you consider becoming a regular reviewer? So you've probably read a few books in the last few years, and you've probably, like me actually, not necessarily commented on them. And I'm going back to some of the books that I've read over the last few years and that I've found helpful, and thinking, hang on a minute, I should write reviews on Amazon and on Goodreads about these books, and maybe even in some cases write about them on my blog, or write about them on Facebook and share links to them. And I would encourage you to think about the same thing. Obviously, if you've got a hold of a free copy of my book, it'd be wonderful if you could review mine. But if you've read other books that have blessed you, that have helped you, I would urge you to consider reviewing them. Consider it your gift to other people, not just to the author, but to other readers who would like to find material that they like. Because if you hit like, even on a Facebook post, or if you hit review on an Amazon book, or if you share something that you've found beneficial, all of those things are little signals to the algorithm that says, this person liked that, so maybe other people will like it. And so our computer overlords will then share the content more. And it's not enough to follow. I mean, I have discovered this recently. I have, through history, if you like, gathered, thousands of Facebook followers and groups and all the rest of it. And what I've discovered, and it's true not just in the Christian sphere, but also in my blood cancer work, where I'm trying to help other people who have the same sort of challenges that I went through of blood cancer, is that you can have 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 people in a group who've chosen to follow either an individual or a group, and you might get like 10 views of something that you've written because the algorithm decides that your content isn't sort of stimulating enough, if you like, isn't, we could say almost revolting enough in some ways, because that's what it's looking for. It's looking for stuff that's going to engage other people. And we have to look at ourselves and say, well, what engages me? And if what engages me is stuff that makes me angry, then there's a problem with me as well. And so I urge you, don't just scroll past this video. Think about it. Think about it for yourself, and think about, what can I do to help my friends and my family and people who just read me online or come across something, or even don't, because it won't just be people your little like button, your little share button, your little review that you type on Amazon or wherever, will all help other people who you may never meet experience and be revealed the content that you have liked. So what has blessed you? What has blessed you? Has it been my book? Has it been something I've written? Has it been something someone else has written? Perhaps you really enjoyed a book that someone gave you over Christmas, and you've read it and you can't put it down, and now you've finished it and you're looking for something else to read. And yes, okay, you can get hold of my book or someone else's book, but before you do that, why don't you write a quick review? It doesn't have to be long. Just tell people what you liked about the book, and what means that they should read it too. And by doing that, we're actually serving, I would argue, potentially the purposes of God, because we live in a really weird age, an age where truth seems to be on the sort of withdrawal. It doesn't seem to matter. And later this month I'll be releasing my Traitor Within book, or at least an early access version of that, because I doubt I'll have finished it by the time the release date comes out. But that's okay, because with Kindle, same with Amazing Grace. The idea is you can get a hold of an early access and actually contact me and help to shape the future complete book. So it's an interesting way of doing things. Let me know what you think. Would you rather wait till it's completely done? Or would you rather have a look at sort of roughly, I don't know, say half of it? But in Trade to Within, I'm talking a lot about how lies that we tell ourselves, lies that other people tell us, lies that live inside us are actually a major part of our problem today. And we see it. We see it all over the media. And I won't get into politics right now. I could, but I won't. But we need truth-filled content, and we need to share and like truth-filled content. Years ago, Piper talked about this. You can look at the internet and you can say, "Oh, it's a cesspool. Let's keep away." Or you can look at the internet and say, as Christians, let's fill it. Let's fill it with really good content that can bless people, content that can teach people, content that can edify and build up and encourage and comfort. I've read some great stuff, and I'm so thrilled that I'm a bit more able to read again, because I've spent years where this noggins up here was a bit sort of slowed down, and still I'm nowhere near where I was like 8 years ago. But what I've noticed is that with having managed to get some of my health conditions a bit better under control over the second half of 2025, that this is working a bit better. I mean, it still can't do a day's work, but it can read a bit more than it used to be able to do. I found it very difficult to concentrate before. And, books like P.J. Smythe's testimony, if you like, in See No Evil, and the things that have helped him in his rescue ropes, and the video interview I did with him, that was really deeply encouraging. And I want other people to find that. I want other people to benefit from that. And I hope you have content that is blessing you. Actually, as well, I mean, it could just literally be a question. If you've got Facebook or if you've got some sort of social media, why not share a Bible verse that has blessed you today? Why not just copy and paste it into your Facebook and say, this blessed me and this is why? Or even if you don't want to comment on it, you just want to share the verse. Let's fill our social media content this year with good quality stuff that's going to benefit other people, stuff that's going to bless and build up rather than cause division. I mean, it's easy to sort of shout, or easy just to watch other people shouting. But actually what we want to do is we want to be a blessing to people, don't we? That should be our goal as Christians. And I think for me, I have benefited from working last year again on updating my book. And you sort of read these things that you wrote 15 years ago and you go, oh wow, actually, that's quite encouraging, some of that. And of course it's encouraging because that book, Raised with Christ, was built on a lot of other people's work. It wasn't all my work. I was looking at quotes, I was reading others and benefiting from them. And Raised with Christ, a book that will help you as you prepare for Easter. You think, well, Christmas is only just over, Adrian, but I hear that good preachers will often start preparing for Easter right now in January or in February. It's very important to have a great sermon for there. But actually, the resurrection should be the foundation for our lives all year. It was a great blessing to me, nothing to do with my book, but a great blessing to me to sit in church just yesterday, Sunday, and the first service of the new year. And the church I'm in, they decided to preach on 1 Corinthians 15, and this is not the end, and the future hope that Christians have because of Jesus' resurrection, that we too will one day be raised, and that this means that our lives have eternal significance. And as well as the eternal significance, our lives can have an impact that goes beyond the grave, even right here. And so there are sort of great theologians of the past, and in some cases of the quite recent past. I've benefited a lot from Tim Keller. Tim Keller's no longer with us. Wonderful that he still speaks, even though he's dead, because his content is available in book form. His content is still available actually in social media form. And, one of his sons is still running his Twitter feed and putting quotes from his writings. And some of that is just gold, absolute gold. His book, Walking with God Through Pain and Suffering, I think is perhaps, I can't think of how you could improve on that book. And it was a book that benefited me hugely when I was going through the mill of my own sort of sickness and my own suffering and some of the challenges that I faced. I found it very hard to read it at the time because my brain wasn't working then very well. But I would read it in just little paragraphs, and I got myself through it over months. I wish I'd read it before all of that happened. It might have given me a better preparation. So if you're sitting comfortable, if you like, I'd encourage you to get hold of that. Get hold of a book like that, or indeed a book about the gospel like Raised with Christ is, that will help you to have a more weight, if you like, more confidence in the truth of the gospel and the truth that, as the preacher said yesterday, we have an eternity to come that will make any suffering that we're experiencing in this life just seem like nothing. And one such dead theologian is, of course, John Newton. And the same preacher, actually, that preached yesterday spoke about John Newton back in the summer, and it was his 300th birthday. I mean, it wasn't the same day, I don't think, but it was the same month. And Pete Newton, not a relative of John, he spoke on a midweek meeting about John Newton, gave a biographical talk, and John Piper's done this before as well. He's done a lot of great biographical talks that will just act as a kind of taster, as an introduction to the lives of some of these great people that have been influential in the past and whose voices still speak in many cases because of their writings. And so, Pete Newton mentioned the letters of John Newton. And he said that, they've been beneficial to pastors through the ages and Christians through the ages. And so I thought to myself, right, I'll get a hold of some of those. But I quickly discovered that, it's a little difficult sometimes to understand what he's saying. And you have to sort of mentally translate it as you're going and maybe even look up some of the words. And so I thought to myself, well, hang on a minute. Isn't there a risk that most people today are not going to put that effort in? They're going to find it difficult, and they're just going to put this down and say, well, this is a bit boring, or not boring, but just difficult to understand. And so why put the effort in? I'll pick up a book by somebody, much more recent, much more current. But as I also read and put the effort in, I realized that this man has so much to say to us today. And, one sign of that really is the fact that his hymn, Amazing Grace, really remains the most popular hymn ever written in the English language. I don't think there's any question about that. It's been recorded more often than any other tune, whether that's secular or Christian, of any genre. It's been recorded time after time after time. It's been sung at often celebrations, but also at funerals and also at times of great national trauma. Obama famously broke into singing it during a service about a tragedy that had happened to America at the time. It's a hymn that's part of the consciousness of the West, certainly America, but in the UK and elsewhere. It's a hymn that is enduring, and it was written 250 years ago. It was actually released on the 1st of January in 1753, I think it was. No, 1773, sorry. And its release actually didn't really cause a huge wave. And I think part of the reason for that was that it was just one of many hymns that Newton wrote. And interestingly, there was a sort of 36-hour period, which I spoke about in a blog article just the other day. And I'd like to, in the book, when I finalise the Amazing Grace, there will be a whole chapter on this and on his relationship with William Cowper. But we talked about that and the fact that this hymn was released on the Sunday morning. And at some point during the day, we understand that William Cowper wrote his own hymn, God Moves in a Mysterious Way, which is again a hymn that has spoken to people at their most vulnerable. And I think that's really interesting, that those two hymns are possibly the two greatest hymns for when people are really vulnerable, really suffering. It talks about, through many dangers, toils and snares, I have already come. It's grace that's brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. Or God moves in a mysterious way, his wonders to perform. He plants his footsteps on the sea and rides on the storm, and it's like God is there with you in the midst of your suffering. And I'm very conscious that over the years, Christians have not always been particularly good at helping each other when we hit difficult, messy times. And what I found, though, was that Newton, he wrote that amazing hymn and he released it in the morning. He preached a sermon. He had tea with William Cowper that afternoon, and perhaps that was when Cowper shared his hymn, because we know that he wrote it that day. But tragically, that night, the author of one of those two great hymns experienced a crushing mental health breakdown, and he never really recovered from that. He wanted to kill himself that night. He tried to kill himself that night. He felt God had told him to kill himself that night. And maybe somebody watching this is struggling with thoughts like that themselves right now. And obviously I would urge you, if that's the case, to reach out for all the secular help that's available: doctors, crisis lines, Samaritans. In your own countries, there will be emergency helplines you can get help from. To get help from a secular therapist or a doctor, or of course from counsellors and pastors if that's more appropriate for you. But here's the thing: God is with you, even if it doesn't feel like it. And that night, as I say, the very night that these two incredibly helpful hymns had been given to the church, if you like, that was the night that Cowper felt completely alone and desolate, and the people that lived with him called for help from the nearby vicarage, if you like, and Newton, I think his wife, both went around there, as they did many times later after this. Indeed, I think for the next, I don't know how long, they couldn't leave Cowper on his own. So between them, they cared for him and they showed Christian love. And I think it's a wonderful story, actually. It's a part of the story that should challenge us, because the truth is this: unfortunately, when life gets messy, there are some Christians that run for the hills, and there's other Christians that just don't know what to say. And then there are some precious ones who decide to be like Job's friends were at the beginning, before they started getting into counseling and trying to fix the situation. Job's friends just sat with him, and they stayed with him. And that's what Newton did. He stayed with his friend, and he refused. And this is really interesting for a guy almost 300 years ago. It's about 250 years ago, 253 to be precise, that this happened. For a guy of that era to say, look, this is not a spiritual matter, even though it was often spoken about in spiritual terms. This is not Cowper rebelling against God. This is not Cowper showing that he was never a Christian. This is Cowper suffering from an illness. And, sometimes we have enough problems being compassionate even against people who have physical illness or who have hidden illness that we can't really see, but it's very real, particularly the fatigue, which, is still something I wrestle with. Praise God, I'm feeling just a little bit better at the moment. And that can make all the difference between being able to do things like this video or not. But whereas in the past I could have spent 8 hours talking to someone, I can't do that anymore. I'll be stopping this video soon, and that will be me sort of feeling a bit exhausted and feeling a bit tired. And that's unfortunately my life now. And there are many people who feel like that, or maybe even feel worse than I do. And certainly earlier in this year, I was a lot worse. People who knew me and liked me said I sounded like a zombie. That's nice, isn't it? But maybe you struggle with that. And unfortunately, a lot of Christians, a lot of just people today find that difficult to understand, and they're not necessarily sympathetic or compassionate about it. But even more so when it's a mental health challenge, we can often feel a bit frustrated. And it's like, pull yourself together. You shouldn't feel like that. You're a Christian. Newton wasn't like that. Newton saw his friend suffering, and just tried to improve that. He said something, and I can't remember the exact wording now, but he talked about there being two piles, human misery and human kind of joy, and wanting to move from one pile to the other, and to help people. But sometimes you can't help people. Sometimes people face what you could call an unsolvable problem. And what they need is just someone to be with them in the middle of that, someone to sit with them, someone to hear what they're saying. And yes, maybe to gently and kindly point them to Jesus and the gospel. Sometimes, though, when you're in the midst of that, it can be incredibly difficult to hear those things, and incredibly difficult to be receptive to those things. So we have to be sensitive to where someone's at. But the gospel certainly can help you in the middle of those moments. And I remember sitting in the chemotherapy room, listening to certain songs on my whatever it was I had at the time, probably earpods, I don't know, but listening to those and actually being blessed by them. Certain songs weren't so helpful, but others were incredibly helpful because they were written, I guess, like Newton and like Cowper. They were written through experience of great pain. Because you see, Newton had been through the mill before the 1st of January 1773 and the collapse of his friend. He'd been through, as he put it, many dangers, many toils, many snares. He'd experienced the salvation of God, but he'd also experienced having to wait. He'd also experienced having to be patient and not having what he wanted all the time. So he understood that, and he was therefore full of compassion for his friend. He wasn't unsympathetic with the weakness of his friend. And, maybe right now, if you're listening to this, I wasn't planning on talking about this as much as I have, but maybe right now, if you're listening to this, you feel like nobody really cares. Now, it may well be that's not quite true, but that's how it feels to you. And I know how that felt. I know how that feels, because for me, there were times in my life when things were really hard, when actually people probably were trying and were doing their best. And looking back, I feel a bit bad about that. But for me at the time, I felt alone. And I could have probably had the best pastor in the world, the best friend in the world, the best family in the world, and I would have still felt alone. And some of that alone feeling you can't take away. You might not be able to take that feeling away from someone, but you can try and show that person that they're not alone. And it may be that they can't accept that. It may be that they still feel alone, but you can give it a go. You can try and show them the love of Christ. You can try and be with them. And it might take hours, days, weeks, years. And that long-term commitment of showing love to one another is what God calls for from us. And it's what we need. I mean, that's the thing. So often today people are quite lonely. And, we often, even in our Christian circles, we often celebrate the lone pioneer. But the reality is most of those people that we think were lone pioneers were surrounded by a team of people that upheld them in prayer, that helped them when it was difficult, and that were with them all the way through. And I guess that's my challenge to you today. It wasn't what I was planning on talking about to this full extent, but yes, I've mentioned the books, and particularly the Newton one will help in this matter, because it will show you a little bit about grace and the way it works in the long term in people's lives, the way it works during suffering, and spoken out of his own experience and experience of working with his friend through such difficulty as well. So I hope you will benefit from those. But obviously, more than any of that, I want to drive you back to Jesus. And he is the one, actually, he's not ignorant of our suffering. He's not ignorant of what it's like to go through things. He was a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And he went through all of that for us, to purchase our salvation for us, but also so that right now in heaven, he's praying for you, he's for you, and he understands. You can't really look at Jesus and say you don't understand. You might feel you can do that with other people, but you can't really do that with Jesus, because he does understand. And he is compassionate towards us in our weakness. He is aware of our, as the old writers put it, frame, our humanity, if you like, our vulnerability. He is aware of that, and he cares for you, and he's for you, and he loves you. And really, that's where I want to leave things this morning. And all the best to you. And may 2026 be a blessed year for you. And if it's a challenging year, may you realize that you're not alone in that. God bless you. Amen.